Hey, is that a phone in your pocket, or is your AI glad to see me? You're watching Tech Strong Gang. Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. Happy Friday. It's Friday. Can you believe it's Friday? This week, I blinked, it was Monday. We've got a lot to talk about, including that little phone in your, or maybe it's a big phone in your pocket. Maybe it's a folding phone in your pocket. But there's a phone in your pocket, and it could be your gateway to AI going forward. We're going to talk about that. We've got more. We've got a great gang to talk about it with. Some of our best characters on the gang. Joining us is Camberley Bates. Camberley, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too. How are the Yankees doing?
Well, they won. I think they won their last two games against Seattle, but it's almost All-Star break. We're limping into the break. Ira Winkler is here, of course, our security person extraordinaire, who's never short of an opinion.
Nah, glad to be here.
Yeah.
Always happy to give that opinion.
And also joining us out in Silicon Valley, our man in the Valley, John Swartz, as well as the Dean, Mike Vizard. Guys, lady, welcome. Let's jump into it. Mike, Samsung announced the next version of their foldable, I guess, is it still a Galaxy or is it something else now?
Was
it a Razr?
Something else these days. That's a Fold 7.
Fold 7, of course, rolls right off the tongue. But more importantly than the folding is the AI. What do we got here?
Yeah, so Samsung was in Brooklyn this week, where all the cool kids are hanging out in New York, and had a big event. And I appreciate what everybody's doing there, but it was basically a 2-hour plus commercial, and so that was kind of like a lot like an Apple event, and I'm hoping somebody might actually change that format one of these days soon, because I swear there was more video showing than people actually talking. But one of the things that was interesting was they were positioning this new phone and all the other phones going forward as your AI companion. And for example, they were talking about how you might be walking down on a subway somewhere and there's an ad for a concert, and you'll take a picture of said concert, and then it will automatically drop that into your calendar, and then not their agent, but some other agent might therefore then go out and buy those tickets for you, and that whole process just becomes something that starts with the click of a photo on your phone. I think we're a ways away from making that kind of everybody's everyday experience, because you got to upgrade your phones in the first place. But Alan, it does seem to me that our relationship with our phones is about to change.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're as a ways away as you think we are. I think it's really right around the corner. Couple things here. First of all, I don't want to discount the idea of this foldable phone, right? Because I think it's attractive. Let me just say from the outset, I'm an iPhone user, an Apple guy. So I'm not going to use this phone, but I like the idea of the foldable phone. And if you look at the screen specs, it really is a beautiful screen. I mean, it's a nice screen with great technology behind it. And maybe we're going to need a bigger screen to communicate or interact with our AI agents and alter egos who are out there doing things for us. Beyond the foldable aspect of it, though, look, I think Samsung, again, is leading with innovation in a hot new area, right? Because, quite frankly, what's the difference between iPhone 16, 15, 14, 13, 12? It's incremental. There's not really nothing. And a lot of innovation does seem to happen on the Android side of the house and with Samsung. And I think their use of AI here, again, positions them as more of a leading edge. You look at the ho-hum Apple Intelligence was all about what's on the comm. Samsung's showing you some real functionality here. It may not all be available, but it's real functionality. The bigger issue, though, is, look, eventually the iPhone catches up, and they're within a release of each other, and they have very similar features. What this means is that all of our phones are going to be our AI gateways, right? Think of them as our digital agents, our digital workers, as Salesforce calls them, right? Our digital workers out there doing these kinds of tasks for us. And not just tasks, but really kind of thinking for us as well. And I mean, more, just taking it to the next level. Now, I think the issue, though, is where we could see a potential roadblock is how much computing power, how much AI computing power can we put on these phones? If you look at the specs on this Fold 7, right, it's on, I believe it's on a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 or something chip, isn't it? Or it's chipset. But there's GPU, there's CPUs, there's, what was it, 12 gigabits of,
There's an NPU in there too.
And an MPU. I mean, this is all great. Is that going to be enough to run the AI in our pocket? Or is it still going to have to phone home to get AI done?
So I'm not
Kimberly,
sure.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I'm not
this is
sure if
yours.
you saw the announcement this week. I think it might have been even yesterday. OpenAI is buying Jony Ive's hardware startup. Jony is the designer of the architect. Nobody knows what they're actually doing. It's well kept under wraps. There's a lot of speculation about whether or not this is eyeglasses or something along those lines. Then Wall Street saying, okay, so this could drive OpenAI to $1 trillion valuation, blah, blah, blah. I think the statement here, you're right. The consideration is this going to talk to the cloud? It has to. In my opinion, we'll see if they can do it differently. But the other piece of that is, where is this going? Strategically, how are these folks envisioning us using the devices? I mean, when Tesla says, or Musk comes out and says Grok is now going to be in Tesla here within the next week. Okay, that changes. So I think all of these pieces of that we look as devices and look at how we interact with things. This AI is not just the phone; it's the car. It's a lot of other things that we're going to be seeing where this AI plays out in.
Yeah, could I just say, oh yeah, I was just going to say this all, frankly, I'm sitting here like everybody's saying this is revolutionary. This isn't revolutionary. This is just evolutionary. When you look at it, I mean, a foldable phone, oh my God, does anybody remember the Motorola Razors? I mean, I'm like, that's innovation. We're going back. It's
But to be fair,
but I'm like,
that was a flip phone, Ira. These are not flip phones. This is
these are
one
like
big
screen technology,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that. I hated moving to like a BlackBerry and then on to an Apple because they didn't fold and put in my pocket well. But with the AI though, it's really just an evolution, because you stop and think like, all of a sudden everything's just evolved as the technology is. And when you start to think how seamless can things be, it will be, in my opinion. And it has become more and more. Like, for example, QR codes on advertisements allow my phone to pick something up, pull up directions, do whatever else. Now we're talking about taking a picture, interpreting that, have an agentic AI kind of go out there. I'm more concerned, frankly, a little bit about the security and privacy again, because you look at this and yes, no matter what, whether or not it goes out to the cloud to process, because when you put something in your phone, it has to do a query. Now, with regard to how fast the chip is, the chip doesn't have all the data set. The chip will just have to process and do basic things, but then still have to go out and pull things. And frankly, if I have your cell phone today, I can pretty much put your life together. I don't know how many people remember, for example, Google Friends, where it's like, okay, broadcast your location to all your friends. I'm like, What part of this seems like a good idea from a privacy perspective? Now we're talking about, like you're saying, here's, let me take a picture and, everything seems wonderful, honestly, that I'm going to have an AI assistant. Like, for example, I want to know if it's going to rain. And I just say, Siri, is it going to rain? And all of a sudden, I get like a weather report saying, okay, where am I? What's the weather for today? Now, if I go ahead and say, Siri, I'm hungry, put out my basic, I don't know, Chick-fil-A order. It has to go ahead, process this, understand it, and then interact with Chick-fil-A and make an order for me. And it knows what are my preferences, what everything is out there about. When you put a query out, it's telling you what you think. There's a difference between a tracking mechanism and people knowing what your Google searches are, people knowing where your maps are going, people knowing what you're ordering from stores, all brought in together. And I'll just leave it there because I think it
I
speaks
want to
for
respond
itself.
to that. There's two separate parts of this. One is the horsepower needed to do these, whether they're revolutionary or evolutionary, to perform this AI parlor tricks, and they're not just parlor tricks. To perform this AI, there's a certain amount of horsepower needed, and phoning it out to the cloud or wherever is going to introduce latency as well as security issues, right? It's probably more secure if I kept it on my phone versus sending it out for now. And when you think about it, these little pocket rockets that are in our pockets, right? There's more computing power on the one you have in your pocket today than there was on the Apollo 11, I think it was 11, that landed on the moon, right? We have more computing power in our pocket than Neil Armstrong had landing on the moon. But that's not enough for this next generation. And, technology, we used to have Moore's Law. You always said, don't worry, we're going to double computing capacity in 18 months. Well, we haven't been hitting those numbers in Moore's Law, but certainly here on mobile devices, we're seeing a revolutionary change, or not a revolutionary change, but an exponential increase in computing power on board. Ira, to your point, though, I read an article just this morning on this, that the fact of the matter is the large hyperscalers, the large collectors of information, the Googles, the Apples, the Metas, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, they continually are adding to their treasure trove of information they have about each one of us, our habits, our likes, our dislikes, our travels, and everything else. And until, I don't know if it's a countrywide thing, a personal thing, but until people say, I'm fed up, goddammit, and I won't take it anymore, it's not going to change.
There's an interesting premise in Mike's story, which is in AI, the TechStrong AI, and it's these two major providers, smartphones and tablets, are basically locked in this AI arms race, and that's going to affect millions and millions of people, if not more. And it's interesting to me when we talk about evolution. I think we should also mention transitional, because Apple, in a sense, I think, and what I've been hearing through the company and people who've left the company, is that they're, in a sense, kind of in a transition from the iPhone era to the AI device era. I'm not saying the iPhone is going to go away, but there might be a new device that.
But that's the whole, to Camberley's point, right, John? That's the whole thing behind the Johnny Ive's smart.
That's where I'm going to next, because that deal just closed, and from all indications OpenAI is going to have some sort of device within a year, maybe 6 months, which also will have an influence on Apple, because Apple is looking at ways to build out their AI presence, and they're looking at companies like Perplexity, and in a sense, even teaming with a company or buying it outright to develop an AI search engine that would twin with Siri. There's like a series of things that are going to happen, and Meta's going to do the same thing. So we've got all these kind of transition as we go back to 2007, right? Steve Jobs, we have the iPhone, which is now our computer in our pocket, and now we're probably in this era where we move to an AI device, which is the next iteration of a phone.
Well, I just want to, sorry, if I could just reiterate a critical point. When people talk about AI, and I hate the term because it's too broad, it's too nebulous, but AI requires two things. And this is where I have to keep harping on it. AI requires processing capability. It requires, well, actually, three things: algorithms, processing capability, and data. Algorithms have been around. We could tweak the algorithms or whatever, but they've been around for decades. Processing power allows the algorithms to function more efficiently. However, the key thing is still the data. The data you need is not going to be on your phone. The data you need is going to be out in the ether, the internet, whatever networks develop. And so while it's critical that we are talking how much processing can be done on the cell phone itself, which means maybe it could be more efficient, you're still going to have all the concerns about going out and seeking data, because until you're at the point where you can put all the data of the internet and all the functionality on the phone as well, which will never happen, you're still going to have to go out to the rest of the world. And we're talking, I mean, frankly, this is an engineering issue that was released, that we have an AI phone. No, you have chips that can process AI algorithms more effectively, but you are still going to have to go out and get the data. And whether the queries are done on the phone itself or the queries are done, it still has to do the queries itself. It has to still search, bring all the data back it needs, and then do more things. Anyway, I'll leave it there for that. I'll tell you what I am concerned about that goes beyond the IT and the security and all those other things is, are we going to live in a world soon where my AI agents are going to call your AI agents and I may never actually interact with you or have a conversation with you, and it's just going to be kind of AI agents doing
What are
this
you
back
talking
and
about?
forth?
It's Wally, the movie Wally. You'll be,
I
Well,
I
and that is
actually,
what's so important, I think, of what's happening with the OpenAI acquisition is that, and Ira, I agree with you, there's three elements there. The fourth element is their interface. And that what potentially is happening here is we're having a rethinking of what those interfaces are going to be like.
the human computer interface.
So what is that major interface? And that's going to be a race to what that is. And most likely it's going to be some level of a small device that we can hold in our hands because we want to carry it around and look at it. But I think that's where these guys are going.
Well, there was that one company that had the pin, if you remember. That didn't go over so good. No. Anyway, hey, we're over time. We got to stop on this. Look, we're not stopping. We're going to be talking about this, I have a feeling, for weeks, months, years. But let's take a break here on Tech Strong Gang. We're going to come back and, AI can't make up legal citations and courts can't rely on them, or can they? You're watching Tech Strong Gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back, and it's not just AI in law, it's AI in just about anything. We've seen this week where the Grok AI was spewing out all kinds of mecha Hitler nonsense, and lawyers are citing AI cases that never existed in the first place. And it feels like maybe we're getting a little too dependent on AI already. But John, you've been covering this whole space. It seems like now every other day there's a new issue.
Yeah. And so in a sense, it's like AI gone wild, right? It's unpredictable, and it's embarrassing companies. As you mentioned, there was the incident at X, which the timing couldn't have been worse. The CEO just quit. The CEO quit basically the day after an update to Grok was spreading anti-Semitic and pro-Hitler messages. Her timing couldn't have been worse. So she left. Musk threw his hands up and said, this is the world we live in. It's just never a dull moment. So ironically, Musk, the guy who warned us about what could happen with AI, was a victim of it. We mentioned it. the Georgia Court of Appeals decision to toss out a ruling that relied on fake cases generated by AI. That's not the first time this has happened, but this is the first incident that I think has been where a court case ruling has been reversed. There have been incidents over the last couple of years where AI has been used to cite cases that didn't exist or to mislead a judge. And the judges have been rebuking some of the attorneys and fining them. There was a case in New York. There are multiple cases. And then there was a federal judge in Colorado who rebuked the attorneys representing the MyPillow guy in a defamation suit when they discovered that his attorneys had used a generative AI program to submit a court filing filled with errors. And I think I want to kind of kick it to Alan because I talked to a friend of mine who is a lawyer, and she practices family law. And one of the things she mentioned was that Law School 101 teaches us, is it shepherdize?
Shepherd.
Shepherd.
Well, shepherds is the book. You shepherdize it is the verb of a shepherd. But
okay.
you know, that went over to computers when I was in law school in 1982, 81.
No.
We were already using the LexisNexis to shepherdize case law. But look, you know, there's this term in law, fruit of the poisonous tree, right? All fruit of the poisonous tree are bad. And so if you have cases that are decided on poisonous, on poison, everything coming out of it is no good. So, of course, the court had to overturn it. I think the case in Colorado, John, they actually sanctioned the attorney and fined him $2,500 or something for spouting off nonsense. But a couple things. Elon Musk isn't the victim here. Elon Musk is the cause. Elon Musk decided that there was too much woke and liberal input into his Grok AI and removed all of that. So it went too far the other way and started spouting anti-Semitic Hitler stuff. And he throws his hands up in the air and says, oh, another day in the internet. No, when you put your finger on the scale, bad stuff happens. I'm sorry. So let's not feel sorry for Elon. He's the cause.
No, I'm not at all. I'm just saying I find it ironic this guy who's been pointing his finger and warning us about what could go wrong is, in a sense, perpetuating this problem.
He brought it on himself. But that being said, here's the bigger issue, guys. Our friend Chris Blask is railing on here every week about his partner, Lumina, and civic AI and putting ethical kind of guardrails around our AIs. And I do believe it's going to happen, not because the government is mandating it or anything like that. I think just good functionality is our patience for AI hallucinations, for making up case law, for spouting unacceptable type of stuff, what we saw here with Grok. The public and the market is going to force people to put these ethical sort of guardrails around AIs to hopefully get better about these things.
Yeah, Alan, could I disagree with you?
I would. I'd be
let me
insulted
disagree
if
with you
did it.
because I think there are two parts to this. In one case, and let's remember, I don't know how many people remember when Microsoft started their own little AI bot or whatever. It became a flaming Nazi within like a day and a half or something like that. Now, that had training data because there's a big difference between the two things we're talking, the hallucinations and this issue. Because with the Microsoft thing, which we have to consider, they were training it from Twitter or wherever else, where they were just listening constantly to Nazis, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. Now, the thing that concerns me and what we should really be taking away with it is we now have an AI where somebody put their finger on the scale, because what happened was the reason it was tailored was if you go on Grok was actually surprisingly neutral. And the problem is Elon's fanboys did not like the fact that it was spewing facts.
Yeah.
And they're like, gee, what do you mean that, like vaccines don't cause autism? And it's like, how could you say that? And then all of a sudden they're scratching their head. Gee, I have to keep these lunatics happy. And they went ahead and whatever they did, there was an intentional tweak because Grok was good. I didn't like some of the things, but it was factual when I checked Grok's facts. Now it went the other way, and that says there was a manual intervention. And that, frankly, that happened because, much to disagree with you, Alan, it wasn't like the public did not support, or was not happy with it.
This was
the public
Musk.
was
This was Elon.
unhappy.
This was Elon.
No, but Elon's fanboys on there were not happy with the fact it was giving what they consider too liberal results. And they went ahead and they tweaked it to give less liberal results instead of just pulling facts up.
So I have a theory on that, though, Ira. Look, AI hallucinations, if you want to call what happened with Grok hallucination, or AI spouting misinformation, false information, there's two reasons these kinds of things happen. One is if the AI is trained in a cesspool, which the internet is in many places today, if you train it in a cesspool, don't be surprised if it spouts cesspool type of information. The second thing is if you intentionally poison it, right? And maybe that's what happened here in Grok. It was intentionally poisoned.
So it's where you get your training data is part of the problem. And that is like, hey, if I want to train it on Truth Social, which somebody might want to, you will get a set of data. If you want to train it on Google data, hopefully it'll be a little bit better. But the reality, though, is that, again, I still want to make the point that the hallucinations in the legal case, that is just people not understanding AI answering, like these LLMs trying to answer a question and trying to give a good answer without having a factual answer, compared to training data, which has pulled it out.
So I think there's a big difference here between these two cases that we're talking about. One of them has a responsibility of the expert to do her research to make sure the data that she is presenting to the courts is accurate, and to rely on an AI to spout cases. If you sit at bar, you're sitting at the bar, to just prove that you have the knowledge base to do this, and you're not getting an AI to assist you in your bar exam. And I would expect that. I mean, if that was my lawyer that ended up doing that and had that happen, probably should fire them. And I think that there needs to be, from you looking at us as people that are using AI and how we use AI, and individually how we are trusting that information. We can't. When we pull that information, we have to trust but verify.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad you brought this back up, Camberley, because there's somebody who keeps a database of this issue, and there have been, I think, 156 cases in which lawyers cited fake cases generated by AI. But then I think about where this is going, and at the same time, yeah, you're right. It's not surprising the number is escalating, despite the.
Well, no, but never underestimate how lazy lawyers are.
Let me just finish my thought, though.
Oh, that's what I was saying, Alan.
Look, I've been there. I've done that.
But here's the thing. I mean, we're talking about all these things, but there's a number that jumped out at me yesterday. It's $4 trillion. NVIDIA just went over that in the market cap, and Microsoft's next. So we're going to see an escalation of AI gone wrong, AI doing
I know,
well.
but I'll give you. So look, whenever you think of lawyers, I think of doctors. Maybe because I did a little of that kind of stuff. But, we reported earlier this week, Microsoft released a new tool for diagnostic medical diagnosing, 4x more accurate than human doctors. That's great. But what's going to happen when it misdiagnoses and someone dies as a result? It's a little different than the pillow guy citing bad cases and not,
I would point out two things. One is it's friggin' awesome that people found 167 instances where AI went wrong. I mean, maybe there's thousands more, but maybe there's hope that we can actually find these things. And then B, my biggest issue with all this AI stuff is all these things are designed to be sycophantic, and they keep coming up with answers instead of just saying, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't know.
Well,
Fair enough.
I mean, there's
you gain more credibility when you say that, when you answer, I don't know, to a question.
Well, for a legal brief, you can say, I don't know. And I think one of the problems is, and let's face it, with Mike Lindell, first off, it's a very public case. And you also have a client who's broke. And if I was his attorneys, I would spend as little effort as possible, hopefully not violating the law. But to your, to Camberley's point, absolutely correct. You expect the lawyers. I mean, frankly, at some point, I think somebody's going to release their own legal LLM that goes through documents that fact checks all their LLMs.
And they are doing that now. They are starting to do that now.
My son worked on that in his law.
Reports coming through.
My son just graduated law school up in Boston, and in his school, they have a legal technology lab, and they're actually working on that very topic, as well as others.
Yeah, but it still comes down to the point where, yes, any lawyer should have fact checked it. The fact a judge ruled on it, he was, or she in this case, was relying upon the attorneys to submit factual documents instead of, now we need judges
but the judges,
to verify what they're saying.
The judges don't read these things. The judges look at the facts. They tell their clerk, this is how I want the decision to go. And it's the clerk's job to go do that kind of work. And, these are kids who just graduated law school for the most part. Anyway, hey, we got to take a break. This is another interesting topic that I'm sure we'll be revisiting on the gang. Let's turn to security, though. Let's talk about software supply chain. You're watching TechStrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, folks, we're back and we're talking about software supply chain security, which has been a top of mind issue for a lot of folks these days. But we have a survey over on DevOps.com where the question was put to C-level executives about whether or not they had any visibility into their software supply chain, and half of them said they didn't. I looked at this whole thing and I kind of smiled and I went, wow, C-level executives actually know they have a software supply chain. So, is this becoming a board level issue, or is this something that's a moment in time because there's just more noise in the system, or what's going on here?
So with regard to whether or not it's a board level issue, the answer is board does oversight. For oversight purposes, the board should at least know to ask the question, what are we doing with supply chain related issues? Because supply chain attacks have become a major problem. Companies have been ruined because, for example, there was a wallet application where they uploaded malicious software into their core code base. And I think what's happened is, over time, and a lot of people, if you're not in the programming space, don't really realize, but code used to be written originally. Maybe there were a few library programs around to implement some basic functions, but lately what software has become, and why you can start implementing generative AI to write software, is because programmers have started not to write their own code, but to pull code segments together from lots of different places. So that's number one. And a lot of people are not tracking well where they're pulling these software packages from. And that's a serious problem. And that's why you have supply chain, because the code you pull from could be malicious. The code you pull from can have bugs and all this sort of stuff that you don't know until you know. Now, the issue is once bugs are reported, there's no understanding of where they came from or where your own software came from and if you're impacted. This is why a SBOM, software bill of materials, has become a critical discussion in the cybersecurity space as well as in the coding space, because you need to understand where these packages are being pulled from to know whether or not you have potential issues. So, for example, if you're a defense contractor and you're pulling code in from China, that's a problem in all likelihood, as an example. However, the other part of it is you might know where you're pulling your code in from, but you don't know where your vendors are pulling their code in from. And then so you have first level problems of writing your own code, second level problems of pulling in other code you might purchase, third level problems where you're pulling in code that other people have written. Then you have where are these people pulling their code in from? And in some cases, supply chain attacks have been down 4 or 5 levels of coding where smart criminals have gone in and figured out, wait a second, I know this program pulls in this library of code, and that program pulls in that library of code, and that program pulls in that library of code. So I'm going to embed something, a malicious piece of code, 5 layers down that I know will eventually be pulled into the software of my target. And that's why these software bills of materials are critical, but it's also why it's so difficult. Because if you have LLM or generative AI pulling software together and it has to track, and maybe it can track better than people. But this is a concern that it's you use the term octopus, but it's a massive octopus with countless arms and arms of arms and arms that boards need to start putting some governance in place. But it's a serious issue. And if you don't have a firm understanding, and even if you do have a firm understanding of where software is coming from, you're still likely not fully visible. And this needs to be addressed. And I don't know if the study goes as far into the depth or it was a trivial marketing study, but it needs to be addressed. I'll say it that way.
I mean, the gist of the survey was if you don't have visibility, you're much more likely to suffer a breach than if you do have visibility. I don't necessarily buy into that. I think there's visibility and then there's visibility, right?
Well, I think at least if you're starting to look, you'll come up with the more obvious ones. But like I mentioned, when it's 5 layers deep, that's where you're going to start having the problems. And, this is where, again, governance, it's a pain to change how people program and force them to write their own original code again. But in some levels, and until it does, you're going to have these issues and you need to have better cases.
I have another solution. Look, we live in a world of Frankencode. Right? Apps today are built by stitching together components. Almost all of these components are downloaded from different repos. There's your choke point. Before you download a component from a repo, the repo has to sort of bless it and say, as far as we know, this is the latest version of this component. It's been verified, vulnerability-wise. It's not been tampered with. The checksum is right, blah, blah, blah. There is a very natural choke point at the repo, want to call it a repo firewall maybe, where we can make sure that the components that the developers are using are safe. And at the same time, that information goes right into your SBOM.
Well, let me actually say how that did not work. Because there was a case, and again, the Bitwallet case I think I mentioned, where what happened was there was a common software utility, like I think it was a compiler or something, and the guy who wrote this compiler that was used by millions decided, I give up. I don't want to do it anymore. So the person basically let his domain expire. Somebody else re-registered the domain, got the email that was sent to verify the person's identity. They took the compiler software, embedded malicious software into it, recompiled it. It was then a legitimate piece of software from a supposedly trusted person, and it made it all the way up into commercial products.
But that piece was not in the repo. That's the issue, right? It was. We saw that. When did it happen? Was it OpenVPN, Ira, years ago? It turned out there were like 2 people that maintained OpenVPN in the whole world, and it, it got a vulnerability and introduced into it. And the idea behind these repos is I think there's more girth to them. Anyway, hey, we've got to end it today. I'm sorry. It was a great discussion. I wish we had another hour, but we don't. Camberley, Ira, John, Mike, of course, thanks for joining. Thank you for joining. We hope you've enjoyed TechStrong Gang today. Stay tuned for TechStrong TV. We'll be back Monday with even more fun and more AI, more security, more DevOps platform, cloud, and everything else. Have a great weekend, everyone. I'm Alan Schimmel. We're out.